Thank you. All right, welcome everyone to the Provo Municipal Council meeting, Tuesday, March 29th, 2022 at 5:29 p.m. Meetings of the Municipal Council are being held in hybrid fashion. That is, members of the public can continue to view council meetings on YouTube and Facebook, or they may attend in person in the council chamber at the Provo City Center. I remind participants to mute your microphone when not speaking to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up and broadcast for all to hear. We'll go ahead and take a roll call of our council members. We have council members Whipple.
Recording stopped.
We'll wait. Right? We want the recording.
I just want to make a case for new audio-visual equipment in the new City Hall building.
Very timely.
Recording in progress.
All right, we'll start the roll call over. Actually, we probably need to start that whole thing over, don't we? No? Okay, I'm just going to say that this is a Provo Municipal Council meeting, 5:30 p.m., Tuesday, March 29th, 2022. Our roll call, council members, Whipple, Fillmore, Handley, myself, Hoban, McKay, Shipley, and Ellsworth. Full house today. I love it. We also are joined by our CAO, Wayne Parker, and our Deputy Mayor, Isaac Paxman. We have various council members or council staff members with us as well. Thank you to all. And Wayne, I know the mayor wanted to be here but can't.
Yes, thank you. So Mayor Kaufusi is out of town today. She's actually attending the Utah Chiefs of Police Association meetings this week in St. George. Tough duty. But she's speaking there as well as participating in a presentation to our Officer Oseguera, who, as you know, was injured in the line of duty last year, and they recognize officers across the state who were involved in the line of duty injury. And so she's there for those purposes. So she has to be excused this evening.
Well, we always know she's doing something good, even if she's not here, but appreciate the update and glad to have her representing us there. Okay. The opening prayer will be by invitation. Today's prayer will be provided by Chief Miguel.
Father, we are so thankful to be gathered here as a community, gathered here in this beautiful city and with its abundance. And we are so thankful for those that serve, thankful for this municipal council for the time and the effort they put in to strive to make this a more beautiful and successful community. We are thankful for, again, the abundance that we enjoy, and we ask a blessing upon this community's residents that they might feel of thy spirit and that they might be enveloped in the love that is here. We are so thankful for those that serve, that protect us, our city, protect our nation. We pray for those that are in harm's way. We pray that they would be blessed with safety, with comfort, support, that they be blessed with our gratitude for the sacrifices that they make. We ask a blessing upon this council this night as they address important issues, that they might have the Spirit to be with them. They might have peace, and that they know of the appreciation for them also. Thanks for our blessings and in our gratitude to be here.
Amen. Thank you, Chief Miguel. The Pledge of Allegiance will be provided by Councilor Rachel Whipple.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Hey, John, you need to get those vocal cords going. I'm going to ask you to read the preamble because people are getting bored of me reading. So I'll let you do that.
As indicated on the screen, a required public hearing will be held for certain agenda items prior to council action. After each such item has been presented, time to comment will be provided for those who wish to speak. For items that do not require a public hearing, public comment will be taken following presentations of the items, but will be limited to 10 minutes. At this time, up to 15 minutes have been set aside for open public comment period, which is intended to allow comments on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Persons who speak during this time to an item that is on the agenda will not normally be afforded a second opportunity to speak during that comment period specific to that item. During any public comment period, each speaker will generally be limited to 2 minutes. Due to notice requirements, no formal action will be taken in this meeting on matters that do not appear on the agenda. For those with comments are invited to approach the podium. Those participating on Zoom will need to use the raise hand feature to indicate they wish to comment. The chair may choose to alternate between the in-person online commenters. Please begin your comments by stating your name and city of residence. You will have 2 minutes to speak. To assist the city recorder with the minutes, we ask those commenting in person to print your name on a slip of paper provided at the back of the room and place it in the container near the podium. Online commenters should spell out their names before commenting.
All right. So this time we'll open it up for public comment. Is there anyone in the chamber who'd like to come up for public comment?
Do I need to sign something before I can come
I think we know you. Come on up. Glad to have you.
Thank you. I know you hear from me a lot, and I beg your indulgence just a little bit more. I'm going to try it this way.
Let everyone else know who you are.
Melanie McCord, I'm from Provo. During work session today, you got a briefing from the Parks and Rec Department on their proposals for this year's budget. Where was your Parks Board? Where was your Arts Board? You have delegated to other people, citizen volunteers, to oversee these departments. And then you have the department heads and the staff come in and make their recommendations, but you don't ask for even a written report from the Parks Board. You have people who have volunteered. And the mayor has said several times that she has a hard time filling the board positions. Maybe it's because this council, in the approach that they take towards boards and commissions, disregards them. I propose that you don't take any briefing from any department head unless you have asked, invited, or solicited input from the board or commission that you've delegated to oversee that department. So I've said that to you before, and now I'm saying it here. And I will come again in 2 weeks and say it again and again and again until you guys start doing this. Second thing is you need a public works board. I have been investigating recent actions by your public works director. I still intend to have a meeting with you about that. If you would like to put me on an executive session agenda, I would appreciate that. But you need a public works board. You've got the multi-million-dollar enterprises all over the city without any kind of citizen oversight, and that needs to change. And the third thing that you need to do is you need to separate the airport out of the public works board. The airport needs to be its own city department. It needs to have a department head that is approved by the council and who comes and functions separate and independent of the public works department. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Anyone else like to come up and participate in the public comment? All right, doesn't appear we have anyone online either. Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Thank you. Our first item of business today is a presentation of the 2020 Utah Firefighters of the Year. 2020? 2021? 2020. We're a little behind. Okay. Presented by Greg Reiners, Joint Council of Fire Service Organizations. Did I say the name right?
I actually will take that. Lynn Schofield,
Oh.
Fire.
Okay, take it away.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Would like to introduce a few guests and actually invite them to come forward. Greg Grinders, Battalion Chief retired from the Sandy Fire Department, who's the chairman of the Utah Fire Caucus. Captain David Larson from South Salt Lake Fire Department, who is the chair of the Joint Council, and Chief Brad Hannig, who's the chief of the Logan Fire Department, who is also on the board of the Joint Council. We also have Chief Henry Clinton of the Springville, Utah Fire Department with us tonight, as well as Chief Miguel, who you've already seen. So this is the 2021 Utah Firefighters of the Year. This award is typically given at the Fire Service Caucus Luncheon in conjunction with the legislative session. But there's been this little virus. For the last couple of years, it's kind of wreaked havoc with those activities. And so they put out a request to find out where the best place to present this award would be. And we felt like bring it home to Provo and to our council was probably the best choice. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of background, and then I'll turn it over to Captain Larson, who will actually read the award and bring the firefighters forward. So on February 21st, 2021, at about 4:00 in the morning, a fire was reported up the left-hand fork of Hobble Creek Canyon. From our city, stations 24, 25, and Battalion 21 responded as part of a mutual aid assignment. We go help each other out. They come and help us. We go and help them. During the course of firefighting activities, a collapse occurred, trapping several firefighters. In fact, some of them were pinned. And so at that point, it became actually a life-threatening situation for fireground operations. Our units, acting as the rapid response intervention team, sprung into action and assisted in removing the firefighters, providing medical treatment, and in the case of the trapped firefighter, actually going down, assessing the situation, figuring out how to get them out, getting equipment into the location, using that equipment to be able to remove him from the wreckage of the house. All this time while the building is continuing to burn around them. So in this particular case, our firefighters put themselves at great personal risk to save the life of a fellow firefighter. As a result of their actions, all firefighters were removed, all firefighters were treated and then transported if necessary to local hospitals, and all firefighters have subsequently recovered and have returned to duty. In the fire service, we have some basic rules of engagement, as it were. The first rule of engagement is we will risk a lot to save a life. Second one is we will risk a little to save property. And the third one is we will risk nothing to save that which is already lost. In this particular incident on February 21st, we had to go with the first rule. We will risk a lot. We will put our folks in harm's way in order to save a savable life. In this instance, a fellow firefighter from an adjoining city. For this action, we have proposed that they receive this award, and they have been granted this award by the Utah Fire Service Caucus. And I will now turn it over to Captain Larson.
Chief, don't think you're getting out that easy. Come on back up. Like Chief Schofield said, my name is David Larson, and I'm the chairman of the Joint Fire Service Council. And it's my pleasure to present this on behalf of the Fire Caucus. And our Fire Caucus co-chairs this year, and in past couple of years actually, is Senator Kurt Bramble, Senator Karen Main, Representative Carol Spackman Moss, and Representative Brad Last. So on behalf of them, I'll be presenting the award that we normally would have given during the Fire Caucus luncheon up at the Capitol. So, Chief, if I could get both of you up also. So as I read this, as I call your name, and I really hope I don't butcher anybody's name, but if you could please come up. It says Firefighters of the Year. The Utah Fire Caucus proudly recognizes Provo City Fire Stations 24 and 25, along with Battalion 21, for their dedicated service in locating, protecting, and extricating a trapped firefighter under extreme fire conditions after a partial building collapse during fire attack operations at 4:06 on February 21st, 2021 in Hobble Creek Canyon. They include Battalion Chief Jeff Wise, Captain Jeremy Moon, Captain Nick Blackburn, Captain Kelly Hubbs, Engineer Todd Gladsford, Engineer Brennan Anderson, I hope I didn't mess that up, Engineer Jake Dennison, Firefighter Paramedic Chad Chapman, and Firefighter Paramedic Spencer Long. So these professional firefighters are being recognized for something very stupendous, although they would probably argue that it wasn't anything at all but doing their jobs. And I disagree. So thank you very much, Council, for allowing us to present this to them. And I will present this to you, Chief. If you all will please come by. One of the things that we do every year is we have a fire caucus pin that we make every year. It's actually quite sought after up at the Capitol. And I wanted to make sure that each member got one to remember this. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Let's take a picture with them.
Thank you.
Council members. I'm on this side. A little more.
One more. Acquisition.
Thank you. That is really special. So glad we had an opportunity to do that. It's pretty good. Yeah. I can't say any more jokes. I was told. All right, now on to our action agenda. Though I have a feeling that's going to be our most exciting thing of the night. We have an implied motion on a resolution appointing individuals to the Metropolitan Water Board. This is going to be presented by Brian Jones.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The Metropolitan Water Board is an independent agency. It's not actually part of Provo City. It's created by state law. There's a little bit of an interesting wrinkle for those that don't know that even though it is an independent agency outside of the city, state law grants the authority to the city municipal council to appoint the members of the board of trustees of the Metropolitan Water Board. And there's a process that has to be followed under state statute to make those appointments. There's an application period that is publicly noticed. There are actually 4 seats that are open on the board, and during the application period, there were 3 applicants. So there is now before the council an implied motion to approve a resolution appointing those 3 individuals to 3 of the seats. And we're in the process of, my understanding is we've already reopened and reposted the 4th vacancy. And so applications for those that might be watching and be interested in serving on the Provo Metropolitan Water District Board of Trustees, where applications are being accepted for that 4th position, and we'll be back in front of the council in a month or so to fill another vacancy. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Can we see the resolution? We need to put that up?
Yeah, that. So we need to fill in the names, I guess, here. 2 of the applicants have been on the board before and their terms have expired. That was Woodruff Miller and Dennis Weir. And so they have applied for reappointment. And then the 3rd applicant's name is Robin Roberts. She's fixing the wall. Okay. Oh, they're getting that fixed and they'll have it up on the screen in just a second.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Jones? If not, we open this up for public comment as well, right?
Well, you can. That's an interesting question. We don't typically open up for public comment advice and consent to mayoral appointments. Of course, as I've just said, that's not what this is. So you could choose to do so, but it's not required.
I love how you always give such a thorough explanation when you could just say, no, Travis. All right. Is there any discussion? We were able to meet the appointees, so even though their names aren't on the resolution, they are there, but do we need to wait before we vote on that to have those names in there? Oh, there we go. Okay. We'll now take a vote on the implied motion. We'll be going in roll call order. I will vote yes. Counselor Hanley?
Yes.
Counselor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Counselor Fillmore?
Yes.
Counselor Whipple?
Yes.
Counselor Shipley?
Yes.
Counselor McKay?
Yes.
That is unanimous. All right, our next action agenda item is an implied motion on a resolution adopting the Mountainland Pre-Disaster Hazard Mitigation Plan. Is there a presentation again or? All right, Chris Blinzinger.
Yes.
Is that how you say it? Correct?
Blinzinger, yes.
Blinzinger, okay.
Sorry, I have
Emergency
to follow
Management
the
Coordinator.
heroes. I'm the guy that sticks swabs up your nose, so I don't have quite. No other presentation. It's just a proposal here. I'm presenting to you the 2022 revised pre-disaster hazard mitigation plan. And there's the Provo portion of that is required to be adopted.
Can we scroll down a little more to part 1? Thank you. Are there any questions for Chris Blinzinger? Okay, we do need to open this up for public comment. Is there anyone in the chamber who'd like to comment on this item? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. So we'll go ahead and close public comment. Bring it back to the council for any discussion. Okay. Then we will now vote on the implied motion. Counselor Hanley,
Yes.
Counselor Ellsworth,
Yes.
Counselor Fillmore,
Yes.
Counselor Whipple,
Yes.
Counselor Shipley,
Yes.
Counselor McKay.
Yes.
That is unanimous. Thank you, Chris. We have an implied motion on a resolution adopting the 2021 Provo Foothills Trail Master Plan. This is presented by Doug Robbins, Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to return and present briefly about the Provo Foothills Master Plan for Trails. This really is a master plan for trails on the west side of the city. It's not an overall city trails plan, but one thing we can see if I can advance the slide. There we go. Provo really is blessed with unique characteristics, and one is the unique geography that we have here. With the Wasatch Mountains to the east and Utah Lake to the west, Provo residents really aren't very far from escaping the city environment into some natural environment. And you're never really very far from this. There are very few places in the world when you can access lands like this so quickly from an urban area. And trails really provide access to these world-class locations. There's a lot of things that people are looking for with regard to trails, but they really do provide that conduit, that outlet to explore the backcountry. We're finding more and more of our residents are exploring out beyond the city limits and on these trails. Trails are also an important part of a healthy, active lifestyle. We see a lot more families and residents that are out in the backcountry, as well as other economic benefits to the community. And so, Provo even has year-round opportunities in the foothills in the northeast area of the city for snowmobiling, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, and now even fat biking. It's new technology that allows people to get out all through the winter months as well. So with more people in the foothills, it requires a little higher level of management and planning to accommodate this expansive growth. And trail design follows much of the same techniques that are used in roadway design as well. Sheeting water off of trails to make sure they're sustainable and don't become rutted like these photographs here. These are common results due to social trails where people just go out and create their own connections from point A to point B. But it takes a little bit more planning than that. And that's what the Forest Service is really concerned about on their land, is all of these emerging social trails that are unsustainable and cause erosion problems. So without good organization and planning, we can love our natural spaces to death and kill opportunities. So this started a initiative with the Utah Valley Trails Alliance, a group of trail enthusiasts that have been working with the Forest Service and to prepare trail plans for communities and adjacent lands adjacent to communities in North Utah County and down into Payson, to kind of address some of these unauthorized trails. So again, it's important to note that this is not a Provo City Trails plan. It's really focused on the East Bench up in Pole Canyon. Over 90, I think it was estimated over 95% of the area considered in this plan as Forest Service land. But with the soil erosion and unauthorized trails, even trespass issues on private land, this has become kind of an important topic. So we held an open house. The main function for our involvement was really to gather public feedback here with the residents of Provo, and we held an open house in February of 2001, and a lot of that feedback went into the development of this draft plan that I'm proposing to you today. Again, each owner of each land designation be responsible for their own land. This isn't some kind of a takeover of responsibility in any way. But the plan objective is really to be sustainable in the long term. So these trails that are established are sustainable, and that non-sustainable trails can be abandoned and restored to their natural environment. The effort was to make them open to the widest variety of users possible and ability levels to make sure they're interconnected. So all the communities along the East Bench can, utilize the same trail systems. And then to follow the law for Forest Service and Forest Service procedures for funding, so we can cooperate with our federal, state, and local and private landowners as well. So steps forward would be to adopt the plan. This provides a little bit of clear direction for the Forest Service, and it's similar to efforts they've made in Payson, up above Orem, in the bench there. Draper and Corner Canyon has done similar work as this, Alpine and Spanish Fork as well. It provides public access as well, similar to the master planning that we've done at Rock Canyon Trailhead. This kind of creates a vision that we can build upon to make future improvements as we move forward, and sets that vision of connectivity. And again, like I mentioned before, this is a critical piece of the approval process for the federal government to fund the forest plan with the U.S. Forest Service so they can develop the plans on their property. That these environmental documents have to be completed, and this public input was the first element of the Forest Service funding plan, and then it goes into their national forest plan, and then they would, at that point in time, allocate funding for Forest Service trail development and maintenance. As far as Provo Parks and Recreation, trail resources that we have available in our capital improvement plan would be strictly used on city properties. We would not endeavor to expand that outside of the city limits. So it's only on city property. And of course, we would continue to pursue grant opportunities to stretch these dollars like we do on all of our projects as far as possible, so we can get the most done that we can. So some examples of where the Provo City funding would be used would be the Rock Canyon Trailhead Master Plan, some land that was recently acquired by the Municipal Council, I think last year at Slate Canyon, perhaps Buckley Draw and some other locations. And then execution. Once the Forest Service is funded and it's within their plan, they will mobilize volunteers and contractors to do the work on their property. And then we could certainly participate in those volunteer type efforts. All right. So again, good design and good planning creates good sustainable trails in the backcountry. It's good for everyone, and it gives our community a foundation that we can get behind, that these trails will be established in the right place for the right reasons and used for the right purposes. So in summary, again, most of the land in this plan is Forest Service land. Provo trailheads and foothill connections would connect to these trailheads and Forest Service lands. There are a few private landowners, and the intent of this plan is to continue our history of cooperating with local landowners and working with them to establish public access where it's possible. There are likely to be unforeseeable obstacles in the future. This plan is really designed to be a working document. It says right in the plan that there will be probably required adjustments and changes as visions might be changed over time or expanded, and even elements removed if needed. But it is that important key element to move forward with the Forest Service, so we can help them in their efforts to provide these opportunities for our residents as well. So if there are any other questions with regard to this master plan that I could answer, I'd be happy to do it right now.
Councilor Fillmore.
Are you anticipating federal funding as we improve these trails?
We would. Once the NEPA documentation is completed, then the feds would create their own funding plan on properties that they own.
So we're not seeking grants per se. We're
not necessarily with this effort.
Forest Service money to implement what they've approved.
Yes, we definitely keep funding sources separate.
Okay.
Councilor McKay.
I read through the plan and I'm just really impressed at the number of hours this must have taken of volunteers and people's time to put this all together. And I think it's wonderful. One thing I'm concerned in regards to the fact that we're going to be voting for it is that there is private property mentioned in it. I don't believe anyone has ill intents on the private property, but I think out of respect of those who have the private property or just residents in general to know that we're acknowledging it. I did talk with legal, but I think we should add just a little caveat or something at the beginning of it or something to acknowledge that this doesn't take away any of the private property rights or it doesn't give any intent that we're, you know what I mean? I just think that would be fair for the residents involved and also people who will look at these maps or utilize them and be surprised if they're told they're trespassing or get yelled at by a homeowner or something. You know, I just want to mitigate that if we can.
Right. Yeah. And we would just continue our history of always working together with private landowners. In fact, one element in the plan does create a solution for a landowner in Northeast Provo that takes the Bonneville Shoreline Trail directly away from their property. So that's one example of this plan kind of moving to a better position. But I don't think anything in this plan should or is intended to hold the city obligated to a certain alignment. It's really kind of like a transportation master plan. It's connecting the trail system with some general lines, but they're not surveyed or anything like that in the plan.
Right. No, I get that. I don't think it would hurt to add something though to just acknowledge that.
Would you like me to read out the language that I suggested to you? So Councilor McKay asked me about this, and I guess I should just say I think that what Doug just said is right. I don't think that this language is necessarily necessary, but it does clarify some things. So I'll read it out, and then I've sent it to Malia. The intent would be that if Councilor McKay or others wanted in, we could have a motion to add this language to the Exhibit A document right before the PDF of the plan. So, and Doug, listen carefully and tell me if you have objections.
Okay.
It says, Provo City adopts as the Provo City Trails Master Plan those parts of the attached Provo Foothills Trail Master Plan that deal with property inside Provo City's jurisdiction and owned by Provo City. The Provo City Trails Master Plan reflects the policy intent of Provo City to support the creation, preservation, and maintenance of the trails described in the plan, to the extent doing so is within Provo's jurisdiction and compatible with other master plans and budgetary processes. The adoption of the plan does not by itself appropriate or commit funds, create or designate any trails, or grant any rights of access across private property. So that was language that I came up with to address the concerns that Councilor McKay asked me about.
Councilor Ellsworth.
I think Councilor McKay brings up some good points. I'm trying to remember, there was a bill last year and it prohibited municipalities or governments from using eminent domain to create trails or parks. And then this year they were updating it to include whatever was not included, parks or trails.
Yeah, so there was already based on a previous bill, a provision that said you couldn't use eminent domain to create trails unless they were adjacent to a road, I think, maybe adjacent to a park, which may have led to, but there was a very small window which you could use it for trails, but it was otherwise prohibited. And then, as you said, there was a bill this year to kind of close off the rest of the loophole. Although having said that, I haven't looked that bill up since the session closed. I don't know if it passed or not.
Okay.
But generally speaking, it's already the law that eminent domain cannot be used for trails except in some very narrow circumstances.
Right. So I would just, I appreciate that clarification because there is, our hands are tied in what we can do as a municipality with trails. And even if there was political will to do it, that we can't do it per state law. So people, I think, are fairly well protected, and I'm glad that they're protected.
Councilor Hanley.
Yeah, I guess my question is, if it's not really necessary, Mr. Jones, do you feel like there's any added risk in putting this in there? Does it somehow weaken the ability of this plan to move forward for any reason?
No, I wouldn't say that. I don't think there's any risk. I mean, I think the two things that it clarifies is it prevents someone from coming to you and saying, hey, this plan has an implementation timeline in it. You have to follow that timeline, even if the money to do so isn't in your your 5-year capital improvement plan. I think the answer to that question is clearly that we're not obligated, but adding this language makes it clear to everybody that up front that we're not. And then same thing with the private property. I don't think there's anything about the plan that legally grants any rights across private property. But including the statement makes that crystal clear to everyone. I don't think that doing either weakens anything about what the plan does. It just, it may add some clarity if those are concerns.
That's very helpful. Thank you. I have a follow-up question. So it says Provo City adopts as the Provo City Trails Master Plan, those parts that deal with property inside of the city. But the purpose of the plan was also to send a signal from the city that we support the plan as a whole, right? So that doesn't that help the Forest Service in their process to know that the city of Provo favors the whole plan? I'm just worried that sounds like we only care about the parts that are in the city boundary. Otherwise, we're kind of neutral, and that's not what I thought we were doing. So I'm a little worried about that being misleading.
Yeah, so the intent of the plan is to really propose it as a citizen proposal with some level of support from the local community. That's what the Forest Service is looking for.
Okay.
But yes,
I mean,
Provo City.
Can we add a sentence, Brian, Mr. Jones, that would sort of, sorry to.
Sure.
You're good at this on the fly, but something that just says, the adoption signals that after public input and process, we are supportive of the aims of the plan as a whole.
Sure.
That was perfect, actually.
I can't repeat it. It's on the record somewhere.
Yeah, I think, and I was just trying to look and see if it needed to be somewhere in the paragraph, or if we just add that to the end.
Yeah, maybe just the last sentence.
Yeah, I think we could just add it to the last sentence. Do you want to take another stab at that, or?
The adoption of this plan by the Provo Municipal Council signifies our support for the plan as a whole. I don't know what now I'm. The objectives of the plan as a whole throughout all the areas affected or included in the plan. Something like that. Let's see what we got.
Is a larger Forest Service.
I don't know. Does that do it?
And I know, Doug, all of this caught you off guard. I mentioned to Scott this morning that this might come up, but did you have any concerns or specific thoughts about that?
No, we've never tried to pursue any kind of eminent domain approach to trail development, when we wouldn't.
Yeah, and I know you wouldn't. It's more of like, I just want the public to not feel threatened, or just to know that we're respecting that, or, it's more of a education on their part, kind of, right?
Yeah, and I think Provo Parks and Recreation can get behind this, what you're talking about.
Any additional, questions? We didn't open this up for public comment yet.
We haven't yet. And so there's a couple options here. You could open it for public comment now, and public comment could even address the idea of adding this language. Or you could go ahead and make a motion at this time to add the language without actually approving the plan, which gives some guidance to the members of the public who might want to comment about whether the council as a whole is in favor of this language or not.
Okay.
But there hasn't yet been a motion made, but I think that.
I'll make a motion to add the language.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Counselor Fillmore seconded. Okay, discussion on the motion? Okay. I'll go ahead and take a roll call vote on the motion.
Can I ask a question? So this is mostly for, I think it's exclusively for the eastern foothills, right? In the mountains.
Yeah.
There's more trails than that in Provo, and there should be. Is if we needed to make another master plan for all trails, would we incorporate that into this plan? Or is this specific to what the federal agencies are doing? How do we incorporate plans beyond the foothills or trails beyond the foothills into our plans and policies?
Sure. I think this plan is really specific to the foothills up and over the peak and down into Pole Canyon. We did not include a trails plan as part of our most recent Parks and Recreation Master Plan, but that is a function that I think we could add easily to that master plan document.
Okay. It would just be a shame if citizens thought that, hey, this is the trails that Provo City's planning for, and they're not planning for trails in my area or by the lake or by the river or et cetera. So, but I guess it's called the Provo Foothills Trail Master Plan and not just Provo Trails Master Plan, right?
Right.
Okay.
Counselor Hanley?
Yeah, but that's probably something we could, even though our committee is also called the Foothills Committee, I'm wondering if that's something we could talk about, to find an appropriate place for other trail ambitions that we might have.
Right.
Because we do have a conversation about the river, conversation about the lake. So those might be places for those to go.
Right. Yeah, I think that could be a component of our Parks and Recreation master plan. You have a trail component as well.
Counselor Ellsworth?
The other comment I want to say, and there will be more opportunities to talk about this, is in Salt Lake County, they're building, I think it's the first NICA course in Utah, which is like a certified, what would you call that? It's a mountain biking course where you can have like specific tournaments and competitions there. And it'd be really, really cool if Provo had the first NICA course in Utah County, and we could bring in these tournaments, these high school competitions, and bring a lot more tourism and industry to our community because of a world-class mountain biking course. And rumor has it that the Wasatch Front has more mountain bikers per capita than anywhere else in the country. So I just think we should keep going down that path.
We'd love to participate in that effort.
Additional questions? Okay, we'll now open, oh, wait, we need to vote on the motion. Counselor Ellsworth? We're doing roll call votes today.
Okay, I'm ready now. Yes.
Counselor Fillmore?
Yes.
Counselor Whipple?
Yes.
Counselor Shipley?
Yes.
Counselor McKay?
Yes.
I'll vote yes, and Counselor Hanley?
Yes.
That's unanimous. Okay, so now we will open this item up for public comment. Come on up, Melanie McCord.
What does your Parks Board think of this plan? Your Parks Board, Parks and Recreation, they've seen it. You've run this past them thoroughly. Have you run this past any of the other groups like Conserve Utah Valley or the Utah Valley Earth Forum?
They've all agreed to it. It's at the bottom.
They are all included in this. Okay. And as to your added language, does that protect access and alignment through certain private properties? For instance, Steve Turley owns the gravel pit at the bottom of Pole Canyon. If he decides that he's going to develop condos on that property, is the alignment of the trail running through his property protected? You say that eminent domain is not the purpose of any of this plan, but the city has in the past required developers of certain property to protect access. And they've failed to do that in some places. Little Rock Canyon is a classic example where development occurred and that there should have been a protected public access to that canyon. The same is true for some of these others. When I developed my subdivision, Dave's Graves required me to leave 15 feet for a trail that was going to go behind my subdivision into Bicentennial Park. That 15 feet never got used and is still 22 years later, a no man's land of 15 feet that the city required me to record on my plat plan that the homeowner recognized, built her fence 15 feet away. And there's this portion of ground that has not been protected, that was supposed to be protected, but now is not. I want to make sure that when that language that you added protects the access through public property. And that is not something that the city has been averse to doing in the past. Saying, fine, you can build here, but you've got to remember that there's public access that has to be maintained here. And I'm in favor of that because I think we haven't done a good job on that in the past.
Thank you, Melanie. Any additional comments? Okay, we'll bring it back to the council for discussion. Any additional discussion? Any additional discussion?
Council Chair, would you like me to address that question?
I was hoping you would.
Okay. The plan, neither in its original form nor with the added language, neither one of them grants any property rights that don't already exist. It's a master plan. It's a visioning plan about how the groups that drafted up the plan and Provo City by adopting it think that trails ought to be. Now, what the city has done in the past is when development comes along is if there is an established easement over the land, that comes out in the title search and the city will seek to preserve those easements. There's also such a thing as public easements, which are not actually held by the city or private property owners, but might be held generally by the public generally. And those especially would often arise in case of trails like this, where historically the public has had access to the land. If there was an established public easement, the city would preserve that during the design review process. The other thing that's happened on several occasions is if someone comes to the city seeking a zone change, and the zone change, which is completely discretionary, comes to the council, sometimes the public feedback that the council gets during the zone change is that there's trails on the property that have been historically used or that the public desires to be used. And sometimes the city has only approved the zone change if, for example, there was a development agreement promising to record an easement or to build a trail or something like that. Now, the city can't, because of the nature of private property, the city can't necessarily exact from a private property owner property rights that don't exist on their property merely for the price of developing. So in a case where a zone change wasn't needed, that would be very difficult to do if no rights existed for the city to enforce or protect at that time. I think what this plan does is it does kind of put the public on notice, and it puts the city employees on notice that we are in favor of there being trails there. And it'd have to be an individual case-by-case basis whether there are actually any rights to those trails existing on private property at the time that they were opened for or applied for development.
Okay. Let's discuss it after. Not that we don't love hearing from you, Melanie. Okay, thank you, Brian. Okay, any additional discussion or questions by the council? Go ahead, Councilor Whipple.
Yeah, so I would just think that if there is a public right-of-way that has been established by prescriptive use or adverse possession or something, that is a right that's held by the public that needs to be established through adjudication. It's not the city's role to do that. The city doesn't own that property right. And it's a different question than eminent domain. And so when Mr. Jones was talking about development, that was a way the city could help facilitate the establishment of that in the title record without the public having to go through a court process. But either way, if those trails have been in use for more than 20 years, then the trail users can seek to have that that right kind of cemented in the title of the thing. And so that's why it's kind of outside of the scope of this document, because it's not a decision that the government entity is making. Or that's my understanding.
Yeah, that's how I was viewing this document, is that that type of discussion is not what this document is doing. It's not, I mean, is it going to help some sort of legal case somewhere? And I mean, are there any implications for that type of scenario?
No, like I said, I mean, the language that we've at this point added to the Exhibit A specifically talks about not granting any property rights. That's the case whether that sentence is added there or not. Really, that sentence is just restating what the law is, so nobody's confused about it. But passing the law does not grant any right, or passing the master plan does not grant any rights. If you think about our streets master plan, we know that years and years from now that there are places where we're going to need roads that are currently on private property, and we have a master plan that suggests generally where those will go. Passing the master plan doesn't actually create the right to build that road. At the time when it's time to build it, we have to go, as Councillor Whipple suggested, obtain a legal right to that property through a condemnation action or through a purchase or something. But we don't have the ability, or the council doesn't have the ability to create property rights on property that the city doesn't own without going through some legal action to do so. And as Councillor Whipple suggested, and as I mentioned in my comments, sometimes those rights are actually held by the public instead of the city, and the city couldn't establish those rights even if it wanted to. Although, as I mentioned about the development process and about rezone applications, sometimes the city has some bargaining power.
Right. And the reason I was saying, Melanie, let's finish this conversation after, is but this document is not related to that type of scenario. That has nothing to do with that type of scenario. This document has nothing to do with that type of scenario. We're simply passing the master plan. Those types of scenarios they're just not impacted by this. So, I mean, it's good to hear all the scenarios and the implications, but for the intents and purposes of this document we have in front of us, I don't think we need to worry about any of that. That's how I take it. Okay. All right. Well, we will go ahead and vote on the implied motion. Councillor Fillmore?
Yes.
Councillor Whipple?
Yes.
Councillor Shipley?
Yes.
Councillor McKay?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Councillor Hanley?
Yes.
And Councillor Ellsworth?
Yes.
That's unanimous. All right, I think this is our last item on the agenda, is an ordinance regarding redistricting adjustments to the city council district maps. Staff, who will be presenting this?
I believe Karen is online and is going to present,
Oh, okay.
although I don't know that she has the data. So when we get to I don't know. Okay, Malia has a slide for us that she'll put up later and I can go over the results of the ranking that we did.
Okay, so Karen, can you hear us? Are you on the line?
Do you want me to go ahead?
I think, Brian, you can do a decent job. You're our backup, but
Well, I'm not going to even attempt to talk about actually the content of the maps, but you've already done that. So the three maps on the screen are the three maps that the council selected in the work session to move on to the final round and to choose between. And those were discussed in the work session and have been discussed publicly and in other meetings and through our online city hall. Malia, can you go to the slide that shows the data? So at the end of the work session agenda item regarding the maps, we made a suggestion, there was a discussion among council about ranking their choices. So this is and the data was turned into me and I compiled this data. I'll go over it and then turn the time over to Karen. So you'll see that the raw data from the ranking in map number 33 received 1 first place vote and 4 third place votes for a total points of 17. And in this particular round, lower is better because it means you've received higher rankings. Map number 34 received 3 first place votes, but also 3 third place votes. And map number 113 received 3 first place votes and 0 third place votes. So then if you look down below, the result of that, if you actually did a ranked choice voting system, is that 34 and 113 are tied at 3 apiece until 33 is eliminated. The person who voted as 33 as their first choice voted for 113 as their second choice. So their vote would go to 113 and 113 would win 4-3 in a ranked choice voting scenario. So, any questions about that, about the data? Otherwise,
Well, let's keep it up there. I'm digesting it.
This just gave me some direct experience with ranked choice voting that I'm not sure I like.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Because I mean, I'm looking at that first round and I'm like, well, 113 is out, and then it wins.
Well, no. Low is good. Low is good.
Low is good. Oh,
I was better in the first round because I was summing the total amount of points they received. And so fewer points is better.
Okay, maybe this is also why my brain is not well suited to ranked choice voting. I can't even understand.
So in simplest terms, Brian, hi, welcome back.
Golf.
Karen.
It's like golf.
Yeah. In simplest terms, 33 did very poorly in all aspects. People didn't like it, so they gave it a lot of number 3s, and only one person liked it, and they gave it a number 1. So we could, if we're kind of inferring, we could kind of get rid of 33. And then we're deciding between 34 and 113 because 33 didn't have a lot of support. Am I correct in kind of summarizing that?
Yes, I think that would be accurate. And then, the counselors will have to speak for themselves and back up their rankings. But then the next step would to say, well, the other thing that we know is that 3 of you think 34 is the best and 3 of you think that 113 is best. And the person that doesn't think either of them is best thinks 113 is the next best. But you'll have to work that out amongst yourselves when you actually make a motion.
Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. Stan Lockhart would be so proud of us right now. Karen, is there anything you'd like to add?
All I was going to do is just summarize quickly for the public the process we've been through. So after we were given the information from the state and from the Utah County Elections Office, we created an online mapping tool and allowed people to submit possible maps that controlled for contiguity and for balanced population within the legal definitions of that. And we had 120 that were submitted, although we did find a few duplicates where people just used different coloring as they went, and that's how the duplicates got through. Of those, in your work meeting on the 15th, you narrowed it down to 11 that we posted on Open City Hall. We had 84 people participate on Open City Hall and weigh in on their choices and give a lot of great comments and insight into criteria to use. And then this afternoon, we whittled it down to the 3 and utilized a ranked choice voting system to see if that gave you some insight into a direction to go. But I think what's been interesting about the whole experience, and this is good for the public to know, is how difficult this is. You're using a framework set up by other people to do something to accomplish a variety of goals, and it can feel near impossible to accomplish everyone's goals in the same map. So I just wanted to get there for the public so that they knew how we got to this point in the process. And unless you have any questions, I think it's all on you at this point.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, staff, and thank you to Brian and Elizabeth for putting together that quick ranked choice voting. I think what it shows me is that 33 had 4 people who didn't like it. And so I'm tempted just to make a motion and say, we'll toss number 33, but I don't want to monopolize the mic here. Counselor Ellsworth.
Yeah, I don't know if it's even necessary. I think that's kind of the foregone conclusion. So, I mean, we could make the motion, that's fine. One thing that's interesting about 34 and 113 is in one of those, I get to live in my district, and in the other one, I don't get to live in my district.
Counselor Hanley.
Yeah, I was going to point that out. And actually, I think in all this attention to maps, I've lost sight of the timeline for applicability. So can someone remind me what happens if we adopted a map in which someone is located out of their district?
It's me.
How does that work?
Well, actually, I guess to Councilor Ellsworth's point, it's going to happen to somebody no matter what, because if you do 34, it happens to Councilor Hoban, right?
No.
Because he's, oh, no. It just restructures the district. That's right. Okay. And never mind. It's just you. Malia, can you bring up the ordinance?
In short, nothing changes until
The short answer to the question is it doesn't affect anything until the next election.
November.
With one possible caveat that we ought to talk about. So it doesn't unseat anybody. In fact, so if you scroll down to where we can see subsection 1, it specifically says changes or amendments do not affect the standing, constituency, or term of office of duly elected council members serving at the time of the change, and a midterm vacancy is not created solely through the effect of such change. Now, the one thing that you do want to think about, though, is in subsection 2, you'll notice that last time we actually made it effective in the middle of the year. I would propose that we actually make it effective at the end of the year. And my thinking in that proposal is this. Last time around, I don't think we thought about the possibility of a midterm vacancy. And so the issue would be this. You've got 2 choices. You can make it effective now, or you can make it effective the end of the year. The issue would be if, heaven forfend, a council member passed away this year and had to be replaced, would you want to replace them from the district that they were elected in or from the new district? So if you say, and that's kind of the question, and it's probably, I suppose, going to come up anyway because their term might not end for another year, but it made some more sense to me to have it be at the end of the year, because there will be elections next year. And so then at least the midterm vacancy rules and the election rules would be the same as far as the geographic areas. But that's the only thing that you need to think about as far as effective date is how you want a midterm vacancy to be effective.
Sorry, can I ask a follow-up question to finish? So in my case, how does it affect, well, I mean, everyone has a slightly different, but in the case of map.
Can we see the maps again?
Sorry, I'm 113. My district is now Councilor Ellsworth's district, essentially, or a lot of it. And so I still don't quite understand what happens specifically to, I mean, would I immediately, as of December 31st, 2022, be in charge of that new district?
Well, I suppose it means it depends on what
would Councilor Ellsworth do for that year?
It depends on what it depends on what you mean by be in charge. I mean, technically speaking, even though you are elected from a district, you make decisions and represent the entire citizenry of the city. So from a practical speaking perspective, it seems to me that the only difference it makes is who you want to keep in mind that might be voting for you next time you run.
Okay. Yeah, poorly chosen words. I'm not trying to aspire to ruling over the lives of people. I'm just trying to get a sense.
You called me Putin today, huh?
Wow.
But that's the reason why we want to think about the effective date, right? To some degree is it does create some confusion for the citizens about, well, who should I go to? And again, what I would say is, to a certain degree, it doesn't really matter, because what they've got to do is come to somebody who has a voice on the council and has an investment in representing them and argue that that person take up their cause. And whether that's the person that they voted for last time or the person that they might be voting for next time, doesn't really matter, except to the extent that they think that might make their argument stronger.
Go ahead.
But otherwise, people serve out their terms.
Right.
So if 113 was adopted and my little star is in Rachel's district and the people who elected me, basically almost, I think only one precinct of my current district is in Rachel's district. So almost everyone who elected me is mostly in the blue district and a little in the purple district. But does that make me an at-large counselor for a year?
You're still the district, you're still you're still for the district that elected you. But the question, I guess, is, again, what does that mean? From a practical sense, I'm not sure it means anything other than that the people who voted for you can come to you and say, well, you're not in our district anymore, but we voted for you. Please do what we elected you to do. And the people in the district that you are now in might come to you and say, if you're intending to run again, you'll need our support to win. So do what we asked you to do. Right. But at the end of the day, your responsibility is still to decide what's best for the citizens of the city.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, George, I can teach you a lot about my district.
Well, if I could just say, I mean, I don't know if I guess it is discussion time. So if it's okay, could I just, I'm still strongly in favor of 34. And I'll make my case again. And I recognize what Councilor Shipley said earlier about why that one is not the preferred one for the west side, although I appreciated his concession that it's a step in the right direction. But I think it improves the downtown district. I think it improves my district. And I think it keeps Councilor Ellsworth's district in a logical boundary. And so I actually think it benefits at least three others. I know Mr. Fillmore has reservations about it going down a little bit in that regard. But otherwise, it does seem to me that it has multiple benefits despite that deficit. Whereas 113 to me feels quite disruptive from the status quo. I don't like the downtown district as it looks there. And I think maybe that's enough said. I can live with either one because that's where we're at this point. And I do think 113 has some positive aspects to it, but it definitely is not my preferred one.
Chair Hoban, if I could just interrupt, we arrived at this point in the conversation because there was a question about the impact of the proposal. We are technically actually in the part of the presentation where we're usually just asking questions of staff, and we would normally take public comment before further discussion.
No,
My apology.
That's
My
fine.
apology.
Questions? Councilor Whipple.
So my question on 113 is, it looks like it displaces both George and Shannon. And then because what had been George's district moves over to Grandview. Am I looking at that correctly, or how would we reassign these?
Grandview, you mean?
This is one of the instances where the person making the map didn't use the same numbering system, but when we put it in, we would use the same numbering system. So so George, you're in, what's your district number right now?
2.
So if we approved 113, what's labeled number 3 should actually be labeled number 2, in my opinion. Because it's where George is.
Could you just tell me what all of the numbers would end up being? Like, what does the Grandview one, what number does that end up being?
Right. That's a good question, because if we're number 113 and I remain in a district, Would the red be District 4 now?
That's what I would argue because.
And then what would the purple become?
That's probably what district are you, Shannon?
3.
Yeah, I would probably make that 3.
Okay, so where there is a council member, you would try to keep the number with the council member if they're not drawn out of their district.
That's what I would suggest doing because
Got it.
otherwise you've got some weird logistical questions to answer at the time of the next election.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay.
We asked for some of the maps to be adjusted, but it's still difficult because when you have two counselors in one district, which one are you going to call it? And yeah, so if you choose one that does need to be arranged, have some patience with our staff as we get that all sorted.
Okay. Additional questions? Counselor Hanley?
Karen, can you help me remember the new BYU district now includes the lower tree streets?
I've been used to the giant one, precinct 319. I know it includes Pleasant View neighborhood at the top.
I mean, my star, if that indicates the street I live on,
Yeah.
that means that the lower, and I'm looking at the current map. BYU district was drawn right around the campus, but this now includes the lower tree streets.
It takes in 4 of the old precincts.
What's that?
It takes in 4 of the old precincts. It takes almost 2 precincts in total and then partial of 2 other precincts.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's shaped very different around the BYU campus than it is now.
Yeah, it's just another reason why I don't like 113. Anyway.
You just can't resist on discussing, can you? I'm just kidding. Additional questions for staff? Counselor Whipple?
In the work meeting, we talked about changing a few of the precincts. Is there any way to take the little precinct with Shannon stars out of mine and put it back in the blue section on 113?
Malia's going to check on that quickly because like you've seen when playing with the online tool, some of those are deceptively populated. Yes.
We tried the swap and the swap did not work.
Right.
But I'm wondering
did
if just giving it up would.
Yeah, I think the one we tried was, it might not have been on one of these.
But I think it's worth asking this question in the public forum so people can see how we've tried to work through it and to make things work.
Take a look at that.
Okay, so she's showing you what happened with that, and it became unbalanced with that piece.
No, doesn't? Okay.
Wait, go back to where my neighborhood was yellow. Oh. Okay.
So if you turn that one blue and then turn, oh, never mind. Travis had something.
I can show you what I have if you want, but it's a little different. Do you like this concept, or I don't want to bring an additional map option up if it's like not going to do the job. You know what I mean? This was provided by Eric Chase. It's a modification of 113 that I believe does not draw Shannon out of her district. And it's within the population range.
Can I take that over to staff to?
Let me email it to you.
Take a picture quick.
Yeah. I'll email it
Sure.
and
Well, let's look at it on the big screen because this is it.
Can you,
Before the medication.
Oh,
Chair Hoban, can you email it to?
let's put it on the big screen.
Eric's going to be so proud of himself. Sends it to me last minute. Try this.
By the way, I also don't want to do what our friends at the Utah legislature do, where they pass a bill in the last 3 hours of the legislative session. That's completely different from what's been proposed to the public. So maybe designing from the dais is not the best idea.
I think that would be changing to 7 districts instead of 5. So we're not doing that.
Ready for that?
All right, that has been emailed. I don't know how long it's going to take to get through cyberspace, but.
Are there other, I was gonna say, do you want to take public comment?
Yeah, let's go ahead and, at this time, we'll go ahead and open up this item for public comment.
Can I ask a question here? Do we, if we're going to consider that map, should we show it to the public so they can comment on it?
Okay.
Instead of
Has it come
surprise
through
them after they
cyberspace,
gave their
Malia?
comments?
It's coming from my work email, so that's why I'm kind of worried it might take a while. Oh, there you go.
So is this a hybrid of 113 and 35, 34?
I'm not sure. It was basically Eric was listening to the work meeting and he said, somebody mentioned swapping this around to make this work. Here's a way you could do it. So I don't know,
All right, and then,
but I would say it's a modification of 113.
and then show us the populations on the new one. How did they balance on, there we go. Oh, and that's much more balanced. So,
Well, there's 2 maps here. One is not representative of, we need to go to final maps PowerPoint rather than the redistricting tool. There you go.
Can I clarify something from what I was saying earlier? I apologize for creating some confusion, but the new BYU district or precinct includes Wymount, but not the lower Tree Streets. It breaks right at the
So Counselor Ellsworth, I want to clarify that the populations are going to be very close because both would have to be within the green bar. So you're not going to see a big disparity in population numbers between these 2 maps.
okay, I just thought when they were, the one that they were playing with, it seems like the populations were.
And that
less
one was not
balanced.
compliant though.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
That one wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, happy to open this for public comment and then I have.
All right, we'll go ahead and open this up for public.
Just to clarify though,
Yes.
all we're talking about here is changing 113 by shifting that one precinct into the blue.
There's a few different,
Or rather, shifting the blue to cover that
Yes.
precinct
And then we
right here.
change Grandview over into this. See? Bigger. This Joaquin one.
Oh, I see. You're picking up Joaquin as well.
Yeah.
I
So
see.
that the numbers work.
I see. Okay.
okay. Melanie McCord, welcome to public comment.
What's the western boundary of your line? Travis, what street is that?
So it's pretty much the freeway.
No, of your yellow district, your.
Oh, the
city's
yellow district, that would be State Street.
University.
Or, I mean, University, I'm sorry.
It is. So the boundary,
Is State Street?
no, I don't think that's.
That's Fifth West, sorry. It hits State Street, my bad. You're right. 500 West, I'm sorry.
Okay, 500 West.
Hmm.
I was in on the discussions when they moved from 4 districts to 5, and I remember the lengthy discussions and the goals that were set of trying to address some really peculiar circumstances in Provo, that you are bound by this limitation of population, even though some of your districts that you've drawn have huge portions of the population that don't vote. And that means that you're not getting representative government. I am in favor and have been from the beginning of 7 at-large seats. I know that's expensive, and then the argument against that has always been that when an at-large position comes up for election, the candidate with the most money can prevail in that case. But, you know, I've been hanging, watching out here for 25 years. And the circumstances in Provo have changed, and the circumstances of the council have changed drastically, fundamentally. You don't any longer have a council member who advocates for one section of town. I've seen it. If there is a council, if there's an issue, members of the public will call any council member they want to talk to about that. They don't just call their representative. They call someone on the council whom they know who is accessible and amenable to discussion. And so I think that the whole idea of districting is obsolete. I think it's archaic. I think you need to have 7 at-large seats. And if and when I ever get on the council, I will push for that. You cannot draw these maps dependent on who has a seat right now. You can't.
Thank you, Melanie. Okay, so you're back. I knew you wouldn't be able to stay away. Anyone else? You only? Would you like to make a public comment? No. Okay. It doesn't look like we have any raised hands online, so we'll go ahead and we'll close public comment. Jeremy Risky raised his hand. Jeremy, go ahead.
Hi, Jeremy Risky. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was just calling in to sort of, I'm Jeremy Risky from Provo. I was just encouraging to vote for the Plan 34 as Plan 113 splits the Franklin neighborhood in half, and just kind of not for that. Yep, that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate you calling in to make that comment. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll close public comment. We'll bring it back to discussion. And Councilor Ellsworth, are you going to make a comment?
I'll just say, I still much prefer map 34. Much prefer map 34.
So can I just do this just because it's going to feel good? I want to make a motion that we vote out map 33, or that we vote on map 33. My intent is to vote it out.
So you were making a motion that we remove map 33 from consideration?
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is let's vote on map 33, and then I'm assuming okay, I'll make a motion that we throw out map 33.
I'll second that.
Second motion, we'll go ahead and we'll vote on that.
So your basic intent is to get rid of
I just want to
purple monster.
get rid of another one. Feels good. We're down to 2, right?
And Chair Hogan, if this makes things any easier for you, instead of complicated trying to remember 2 different rules, the roll call votes are required for approving ordinances and resolutions.
Okay.
You don't have to do a roll call vote for this vote.
Okay, all in favor of removing map 33 from consideration, please raise your hand. Okay, that fails. Oh, okay, that passes. All right, 33 is removed. Bye-bye, purple monster. Okay, we now have 2 maps to consider. Any motions? Any discussion? We actually have 2.5 maps to consider. Do we want to go ahead and decide between 113 and 113B?
I'm going to make a motion on 34, and if it fails, then we'll know if we need to consider 113. So I move that we adopt map 34.
Second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay, discussion on that.
Mr. Chairman?
And I'll just clarify that when we vote on this, because she moved that it be adopted, if it has 4 votes, it's adopted,
Well,
right?
kind of. What the motion really stands for, because of our requirement in our handbook that amendments to the ordinance have to be written down before they can be approved. What you're really doing is making a motion to pick 34 and insert it into the ordinance. And then you'll have to have a vote on the implied motion to approve the amended ordinance.
The same intent.
Yeah.
Right? But process has to be followed. Okay. Just wanted to make sure everybody's aware that we're not doing cuts by round anymore. This is we're getting down to the nitty gritty. Okay. Yes, Mr. Fillmore.
Well, I'm debating what my comments should be.
All right. Well, while he's debating, any other comments?
It seems to me like we're down to 3 maps, right? You now have 113A and 113B, right? And we're told they're both viable numerically.
So what we had here is what we have now is based on if we went by the ranked choice voting, we have the 2 maps that both received 3 first place votes. And then 113B would be a substitute for one of those, for that one, for 113. But the basic gist is these 2, 34 and 113, was kind of a split vote with, once we eliminated 33, according to ranked choice voting, 113 had more support.
Right. So what I'm saying is we just spent a fair amount of time considering an amendment to map 113. And it makes more sense to me. I mean, we were kind of trying to accommodate different people's interests. Makes more sense to me that we take a look at, so I make a counter motion, if anything, I guess, to consider 113B first, which has been the subject of much discussion.
There's a substitute motion by Councilor Fillmore to consider 113B, we'll call it. Is there a second on that?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilor Shipley. Discussion on that substitute motion.
Is the motion to adopt 113B, or is the motion to supplant 113A with 113B?
I understood it as to supplant 113 with 113B.
No, my intent was to vote on 113.
Okay.
It's adoption.
Okay. Discussion on that motion.
Okay, so that's 113B. So just to kind of a point of clarification, Mr. Hanley, you're still on the periphery of your district right there, right? You're not in the middle of your district like with 34.
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, the virtues of 34 from my perspective, and I apologize, I spoke out of turn earlier. But since it's getting to the crunch time, I feel like I just want to emphatically make the point. I never believed that we were so broken that we needed a drastic fix. So I feel like 34 is a modest improvement over some of the problems that we've experienced in the past. It's a modest improvement of the West, and it's a modest improvement of my district. And it keeps a downtown pretty consolidated, and it doesn't make dramatic changes to District 3. So those are all very, very important positives as far as I'm concerned, because anytime you push any one of those elements too far, it ends up making pretty significant changes elsewhere. So I would urge the council to think collectively about those benefits. I could elaborate on those, but I mean, the downside of District 1 having to go down a little bit around BYU in that way is that it gives District 2 2 more voting areas that it doesn't have, which is below Kiwanis and above North Temple. So it gives me, is that Edgemont? Is that the beginning of Edgemont? Sort of north of the canyon. I think those are tremendous benefits to a slightly still problematic situation in District 2, but much better. And I think the costs of those improvements are minimal elsewhere. In fact, I think there are benefits elsewhere. So I just, having said that, I'm sympathetic to being disruptive to Counselor Ellsworth's situation. That's not the main reason I'm not liking 113, to be honest. And I don't say this out of callousness to her situation, because if it were me, obviously it would be uncomfortable as well. I tried to go into this without worrying about whether anyone was unseated from their district. I was looking for the best map. I don't think it's the best map, 113 or 113B. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Counselor Ellsworth.
I agree with Mr. Handley. And when I was doing the ranked choice voting, the Purple Monster version 33 kept me in a district where I could run again. And I intentionally prioritized 113 before the Purple Monster, even though it drew me out of my district. And so I didn't go into this like Mr. Handley trying to keep everyone in their districts. That wasn't even in the top 10 of my priorities. But to Mr. Fillmore's concerns, he said that he didn't want to rock the boat. He didn't want a dramatic change. And 113A and B are both dramatic changes for me. And additionally, Mr. Fillmore said that he didn't want this peninsula or finger running down into the center of the city or close to BYU. But that's what I see in 113 as well. So I don't see the virtues of 113 over 34 based on the values that Mr. Fillmore outlined previously.
Permit me to disagree categorically. It pains me to disagree with George and Shannon on this. I appreciate your thoughts and your feelings. I do not like District 34 for at least 4 reasons. Primarily is the fact that it keeps Grandview on the west side. I think we've had plenty of arguments in opposition to that, and they make sense to me. Secondly, I don't like the arbitrary peninsula coming down to the center of the city from the northeast. I think that's illogical. Thirdly is that George persuaded me that BYU ought to be in District 1. And the fourth thing is that if you...
I want to clarify, I didn't actually argue that. I just said that it was not as... Mike.
Okay, fair enough. So, but the other thing is I think that the advantages of 113 are pretty significant. They separate Grandview from the west side. They keep District 1 intact. District 2 has a community of interest from north to south with the Foothills and the neighborhoods there east of State Street. And I like 13B, the way it consolidates downtown and shifts Councilor Ellsworth to the right and to the east. And I don't know what everyone's plans are in terms of hoping for re-election, but I don't think that should be an issue. I think we should be looking at, whatever the best and most logical districts are. But I feel quite strongly that 113B is a far better approach than 34.
Counselor Shipley.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to think of a new way to put this because I think you've heard enough from me about why the west side needs to be separate. But let me just put it this way. So I've lived there for about 15 years. And we're talking today about making shifts that inconvenience maybe the southeast, maybe, parts of the east, maybe they change, how Grandview looks right now as far as that district. But for decades now, the west side, west of I-15 has felt a disconnect, with the city, a lack of connectivity with the city and a lack of representation with the city. And, I'll just speak for myself, living out there for as long as I have. I think until you've lived out there, I don't think you get that sense. When you campaign out there, you get that sense really quick. People will let you know really quick that they feel a disconnectedness with politics and with the city. Again, for me personally, for the folks that I talk to out there, I think many of us are talking here like it would be this significant inconvenience going forward if we made an adjustment. What I'm saying is this has been a significant inconvenience for the west side for decades already leading up to this. And I think, all I can say is that I'm sorry that it's an inconvenience going forward for some of our districts, but the west side has had it very inconvenient for a very long time. And I think it's as the area that's going to achieve probably the most voter increase over the next decade, the most single family homes, the most voter count probably increase over the next decade. I think we owe it to that part of town now finally to say, look, we're going to get you representation. We're going to focus on some of those growth issues that are going on that are really complicated. Some important things that are happening on the west side. Anyway, I just think that it's time to finally take a hard look at making that happen. That's why I had us vote on 6 districts, because I knew this would be inconvenient for districts to push everybody around, if I really asked strongly for this. But I knew I was going to be asking strongly for this. And so when the 6 districts didn't go through, I'm not going to back away from the idea that I went into this for myself, selfishly. I'll just say selfishly as a resident of the west side over the last 15 years, for my neighbors, for people I talked to in the campaign, and then for the interests of Provo City, which I think are changing over the next decade enough to warrant, this separate district. So anyway, I've said enough, but I think it's time I think they deserve that. I think they've been inconvenienced for decades. I think everybody's going to be slightly inconvenienced by this, but I could say that the west side's been inconvenienced for a long time, not having representation west of I-15.
Councilor Ellsworth?
Yeah, on map 34, Councilor Shipley, I was told by Chair Hoban that the Grandview area would have, I think, half the voters that the west side had and 1/3 of the population that the west side had. So I'm just curious, why couldn't or why shouldn't someone from the west side run?
And I would say for the exact same reason that you say, why couldn't somebody south of Center Street win? You won. I mean, I think we're playing in these hypotheticals of like, but we've got history on the side of the west side not having representation.
Okay.
Where we have history on the side of somebody south of Center Street winning in the southeast and being well represented. So
because of the shape, it's mostly south of Center Street.
So what I'm saying is we have history though that shows that it could go either way, right? But that historically, west of I-15 has not had representation.
So the shape of my district now includes an area that's north of Center Street and that's north of the water park, which is probably the most affluent part of my district. And no one from that area has ever ran. People from where the majority of the land masses run, people south of Center Street. And so I'm just making that comparison, even though there is, a density basically of voters in Grandview. The land mass and the population mass is on the other side of I-15. But we don't know. I guess we can't speculate on who's going to vote or who's going to run.
Councilor Hanley? Oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Whipple?
Go ahead.
It's okay, but I'm glad to know that glaring works. So my question is for Councilor Shipley. In 34, we have Grandview going with the west side. And in the 113 variations, we have parts of Franklin, South Franklin going over there. It seems that your preference is to have chunks of Franklin. So divide up the Franklin neighborhood, put it over. Do you feel that that neighborhood is more congruent with the rest of the west side than Grandview? Or are you not worried about somebody running from Franklin and not representing the west side? I'm trying to understand why one addition is better than the other.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I think history is all I can go off of, right? And District 4 has been represented by Grandview. I don't know what will happen by taking West Franklin. I mean, we would be speculating. I think that West Franklin socioeconomically has more in common with what's existing on the west side. I think they're closer to I-15 just in how this is drawn, right? There's more that's in proximity to I-15 That's all I would say. I don't know for sure. But I think there's a lot more. I mean, when you look at 34, I guess I would agree with Bill that it looks like we're trying to, I mean, I think there's an argument to be had that it looks more like we're gerrymandering those two districts, both 4 and the top one. It looks more consolidated and concise in 113B to me.
I would just respond that my district looks weirder in 113 than it does in 34. So I think the boundaries are just going to be jagged and strange no matter what we do. And so it's, no, the original 113. Well, I do prefer 113B over 113. But even with that one, my eastern side is jagged. And so I believe I have enough confidence in the voters for them to be able to look at these jagged lines and realize that we're working with the precincts that we're given and that we're doing things that are continuous. They're next to each other and not really stretching to, what were those crazy maps called? The super fun, ridiculous ones. So we're clearly not doing that with any of these. So with none of these, am I concerned that they look gerrymandered or that they look like we're stretching or doing something artificial. It looks like we're just working with the constraints that we've been given.
Counselor Hanley.
Yeah, I guess it's a question to Mr. Shipley again. I heard a little bit of a, if we've been hurting, then we should be hurting other people too, which I don't think that was the spirit of what you were saying. I'm not sure, but that's a little bit of what it sounded like. And so I wanted you to clarify that a little bit, because this isn't a matter of measuring inconvenience. I think it's really what I'm happy to do what's, change things up if it improves things. But if the changes don't improve things, then it's not an inconvenience.
Right.
It's taking steps backwards. And you said 34 improved things. The Grandview area is smaller than it is in the current map, correct? And so it seems like it's still a very consolidated Western district. So I thought you sounded like it wasn't a deal breaker, but now it sounds like it is. I just want clarification. And I would like to hear a little bit more about what you mean by inconvenience, because I don't think that word didn't settle well with me, because it just sounded to me like you were just saying we were reacting to something that was inconvenient, and I'm reacting to something that I feel like is a disruption to a situation that's not broken for the 5 districts.
Yeah.
And could be broken by 113 or 113B.
So possibly in my comments, I was too kind about 34. I was saying it was moving the right direction, but it's kind of like how we've talked about all these maps, like the least of what we don't like and the next level of what we don't like. I've always said from the very beginning that I thought that and I think I've been consistently strong saying I don't think Grandview belongs in the West Side district. I just don't think it does. So moving that direction is a positive thing, but it doesn't mean that I back away from the fact that I think Grandview shouldn't be there. To your point about the inconvenience part, I guess I'm hearing people saying, well, this changes my district. This changes how the strength of my district. This changes, things like that. And all I'm saying is, I think all of us, somewhere on this map, we're not getting what we want, somewhere. Or it's not perfect somewhere. And that's the comment about 6 districts potentially, and it doesn't even clean it all up, honestly. Even the 6th district didn't make it perfect. But I guess my point is, I think there are, like, we can look at 113 and say, sharing the foothills makes sense. Sharing mostly west of I-15 makes sense, because there are issues associated with that barrier of I-15, significant issues of having I-15 there from a transportation standpoint and a connectivity standpoint. So independent of making things inconvenient, for going forward, which is what I was hearing from what I thought I was hearing, maybe I wasn't. I think there are communities of interest here that make sense, and look like they make sense. Just the picture makes sense, from a standpoint of sharing areas of the city.
So does well, maybe I'm asking something you've already answered, but the Grandview slice that's in 34 is quite a bit different than what's in the current map. And so do you see that as like neutral, or is that better? Slightly better?
Yeah, I think that's what I was alluding to earlier, which is it takes a few of the voters away from Grandview, and that's a move in the right direction. I think in some ways it makes that slice of Grandview, I think if I was Grandview, I would want Grandview in a district. I guess I'll say that. I mean, I think it makes sense to just keep them all together, instead of splitting them in half.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor McKay?
While campaigning, I didn't, hit every door in the city, but I did knock in every district in the city. And what struck me and why I want Grandview also separate and everything west of I-15 in one district is that the west side, not Grandview, the west side of I-15, I did hear that over and over, that they felt underrepresented, that they wanted their own district. And I didn't hear that complaint or that issue or anything about that brought up in any other district I knocked in. So I just agree with Dave on that is something we need to address. And I think that 113B addresses it really well. And I think everything's really compact. And I do think that the Northeast goes well together and that they have, it still keeps the areas that were developed together.
Chair Hogan?
Yes.
Could I make a comment? I was going to save this actually until the motion was voted on and then just pointed out as a logistical issue that needed to be addressed after. But as I've been looking at the map, I think maybe I need to make the comment now because it might actually affect the substantive vote, which is that to the degree that 113B is preferable for the purpose of keeping Councillor Ellsworth in her district, I don't think it actually does that. And here's why. Because if you pick 113B, you're going to have to assign the green area to be either 2 or 3 and the purple area to be either 2 or 3. And I think you're going to be inclined to make the purple area 3 because if you make it 2, there won't be an election there for 3.5 years. So I just wanted to clarify that issue, that to the degree that that's the deciding factor between 113B and 113A, I don't think it actually does what you've been talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. If every other district is better served by 113A, and we made that modification for me, it doesn't make sense because either way, I'm in someone else's district.
So Brian, so you're saying Councillor Ellsworth would probably be our preference to draw her out of that district anyways?
Well, not to draw her out, but
choose the one that draws her out.
Yeah, if you look at the map, they both do. Because if you look at the map,
to decide that she is that
if you look at that map, you're gonna the red is going to be District 1, the blue is going to be District 4, the yellow is going to be District 5, and then you have 2 councillors living in the green. So you're going to have to pick one of their districts to assign to the green. You're going to have to say the green is 2 or 3, and you'll have to say the purple is whichever one you didn't assign to the green. And if you assign 2 to the purple, they won't actually have an election for 3.5 years because Councillor Handley's term doesn't end until then. So I suspect you will decide that it's better to say that the 2 is green and that the 3 is the purple is 3. In which case, Councillor Ellsworth is not inside her district.
Yeah, To reiterate part of Brian's point, 113B is not substantially better than 113A. It's just different.
Okay. So just so I am clear, if we were thinking 113B was, oh, it's going to keep Shannon and Counselor Ellsworth in a district, it does not solve that problem.
That's correct. It will displace either Counselor Ellsworth or Counselor Handley, and you'll have to decide.
And
which one of
likely
them
we
to
would choose
displace.
Counselor Ellsworth because of the practical
Unless-
aspect.
Unless we labeled the center district, District 3, right? And then I would be living in District 3, which I was elected to represent technically.
Well, but you don't live in the center district in 113B, right?
True. You're
No,
right.
It wouldn't work.
Okay.
Counselor Hanley, you had a question or
So
comment?
does a lot of it depend on the naming?
It does because the way that the ordinance actually works, we're looking at a map. What we're actually going to do to the ordinance when you pick a map is list the precincts that are in each
The
district.
precincts under the district number. Yeah.
But just a question, aren't we kind of getting lost in the forest here a little bit with the numbering issue?
Well,
I mean, Shannon is elected to represent her district right now until her term expires.
but there's a
Yeah,
practical matter of when the election
That's
would
not
be
the
held.
That's not the issue that I'm.
Couldn't we make this whole redistricting effective in 2 years?
We basically already are, but I mean, that's what I argued for earlier. What I'm saying is you have to pick which district the purple area is because that determines when the purple area will have an election.
Okay. It just seems to be that I think we lose credibility if we're focusing on trying to keep anybody in a district.
Well, and I just want to make clear, that's not what I was doing. I'm not arguing that you shouldn't pick either of the 113s for that reason. I'm just pointing out that 113B does not solve the problem that was raised about 113A.
Fair enough.
Okay. Counselor Hanley's been waiting.
I just have a quick clarification that I don't know what kind of miracle it would take, but it would be of staggering proportions to convince me to run for a third term. Just throwing that out there. And I would really like to hear from Mr. Hoban, given the fact that you replaced a counselor who had been there from Grandview, had been there for a very long time, a man I loved and respected very much. But I wonder if you haven't been more sensitive, more responsive to the West Side historically, if you feel that 34 exacerbates or perpetuates the problems that have been there historically. So I will comment, but Counselor Whipple had a question and a comment, and so did Counselor. No? Okay. Counselor Ellsworth. Did you have a comment or question?
My comment was really to what Brian was saying. We're not just making the decision on the geographic boundaries. We're making decisions on the name of the district and when they're running again, which does have implications, which I had previously not recognized that. So I just wanted to highlight that.
That's why I want to make a substitute motion that we decide, and I don't know how we phrase this, but I think we need to decide if we want 113 or 113B before mentally I can wrap my brain around choosing one or the other. I need to know from Counselor Whipple, do you like how your district is structured in 113B than you do in 113? Is it better?
I think I like 113 better for my district because it is more compact, more centrally located, and my plan is just to run every single street in my district, so that's going to be easier.
So wait, B or
B.
are you comparing 30?
Wait, you like B better than A?
113B I like better than the basic 113.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I'd like to make a motion that we supplant, to use your word, 113 with 113B. Is there a second on the motion?
Second.
Okay,
That's
discussion.
a substitute motion. That's
a
supplants.
substitute motion to supplant. We're not adopting this map. We're supplanting a map. Is there a discussion on the
I do
motion?
have a discussion on the motion. So the last counselor who came from that district lived in what on 113B would now be the blue district, right? And I'm just wondering, do you feel like there's enough permanence or stability in that yellow district to facilitate candidates over time?
Yeah, because I've been seeing a lot of investment in South Joaquin, in Mazer, in Franklin, all of these areas where you have these cool old houses. People are buying them, investing, and staying in the neighborhood. So I think that with that core around the downtown, you have a lot more stable people who have come to downtown specifically for what it offers and who would be willing to do that. And of course, we're also building all of these huge new apartment complexes, and people who live in apartments are residents of our city. They can be actively engaged and involved, and they can run for office. And I don't want to discount them in favor of assuming that people who own detached single-family homes are somehow more qualified for public service.
Well, thank you, because I live in multifamily.
Okay, discussion on my substitute motion? If not, we'll go ahead and we'll take a vote. All in favor of supplanting 113B in replacing 113 with 113B, raise your hand. Okay. So that passes all. Okay, so that passes. So 113 is now no longer in consideration, which just helps me mentally. Like I can focus on two things, not three. Okay, now we're back to the original motion of approving 113 or choosing 113B. And Counselor Hanley had asked for my opinion. So one thing I want to share is the North Park neighborhood chair and the River Grove neighborhood chair both feel, and I need to get your opinion on this, Counselor Whipple, both feel that they deserve to be with downtown. And that could be a anti-Grandview sentiment similar to the West Side. I'm not sure, but I worked my butt off in those precincts, so I'm not sure why they would feel that way. So I hope it's not that, but they feel more connected with downtown. So that I'm just going to say that gives me a little bit of pause, and maybe makes me think, the whole Grandview, the Horn of Grandview should be with the West Side, but then there's also the West Side saying we don't want Grandview either. So nobody wants Grandview. Yeah, I am. I'm just trying to lighten the mood a little bit. But I am curious, Counselor Whipple, I don't feel like I really heard that from you a lot. In fact, I feel like I maybe heard a little bit to the contrary, that maybe and I think you said this as well, Counselor Shipley, that you felt like those areas were a better fit for Grandview than downtown. So I'm curious what you think as the downtown rep.
So I think there is a lot of similarity between River Grove and the west side of North Park. And I think either of those could go either way, if that makes sense. But if you look at both of these maps, you have North Park divided. I don't get all of North Park in either of these. So in the 34, the hospital portion of North Park goes with Mr. Fillmore's district. And 113B, it's the west side of North Park that I would end up losing. I like that we end up with North Park and those Dixon areas together. I think that's a cohesive thing, and you have that in both of the maps. The question is whether we keep them with the downtown core or if we put them with the Grandview River Grove area. I don't know what's best on it.
Okay. I think what Counselor Hanley was asking me is, do I feel like the West Side is disserviced by the fact that they have a rep from Grandview? Obviously, it's an easy answer for me that I feel like I've done a bang up job. That being said, I have, learned some things along the way. And so I obviously understand where the West Side's coming from, where, they feel like they need to have their own district. I'm really torn, to be honest with you, because I think if you counted up the votes, I probably voted with the west side every time. So, you know, I'm not solely focused on the west side. I also just want to say that I think there are parts of the west side that are as different from each other as a lot of other parts of the city. So to say the west side is this like homogeneous, you know, community of interest, it's like the north part of the west side is closer to Grandview probably in character and than the south side of the west side. So I'm not going to be much help. I think I'm realizing I'm the like split. I'm the swing vote here. So everybody just wants me to choose. I get it. Give me like 2 minutes to think while Counselor Ellsworth makes her comment.
I don't have a comment. I want to make a motion that we adopt map 34.
So there was,
What motion do we have
you
on the
made,
table?
Counselor Ellsworth, you made the original motion to adopt 34. He made a substitute motion to adopt 113B. So
Now we're back. Okay, so we're at the second.
effectively, we're doing the same thing. We have to choose between 113B and 34 now.
Okay,
So,
but the motion that's on the table is for 113 adoption.
yeah.
Okay, thanks. 113B adoption. Okay.
And he
This is
did,
multiple
he did
layers
make it
of
130. Yeah.
motions.
Oh, man. I didn't want to be.
We could have a recess and then we could come back.
Been in your shoes.
Well, given Councilor Ellsworth's comment, I would say, we've been talking over with staff. If you pick 113B, we're going to need a recess anyway because they don't have the precinct numbers. And we're going to have to assemble the precinct numbers and stick them into the ordinance. So if a recess is helpful, you could take the recess now and we could work on getting the numbers ready for either choice while you're in the recess. Just a thought.
Or we could just vote. Travis. Man, we got to be done in 24 minutes.
Shipley's like, Travis, let my people go.
And you're also determining my fate.
No pressure.
I just need to go through this in my head. All right. So Counselor Hanley likes what 34 does for his district. And I can really appreciate that. Because he's had some challenges there. Counselor Ellsworth, I need your opinion on this. So I really don't see 113B as like blowing up your district. It's just that you have Counselor Hanley, who's the new pharaoh over the southeast side, right? Is that, I mean, you're concerned about the Tree Streets always winning the election over the southeast, right? Is that what your concern is?
That's part of my concern. And another part of my concern is that there's not, in my perception, from the south, living south of Center Street, there's not as much similarities as he finds with his area. And so I have been, in my opinion, a good shepherd and steward and carer for the district that I have. And I feel like people in my area are connected and related to the mall. I feel like people in my area are connected and related to the areas around the state hospital. People are connected to parts of Joaquin and Mazer. I don't feel like people are connected to the Tree Streets. It's a different vibe there. In fact, there was an article in the Salt Lake Tribune about Provo and how it's becoming maybe a more inclusive place. And it kind of gave this praise to the Tree Streets. Someone who is not from around here, is not part of the predominant religion, intentionally chose to live in the Tree Streets because of what they liked there. And I think there's a lot of good things about the Tree Streets. I have tons of friends that live there, but to me, it's distinct. It is distinct from areas that are to the south. Like I said, there's a ton. There are hundreds, thousands of multifamily units in Southeast Provo that are not predominantly student housing. And that's not something that exists in George's area. And again, I have nothing against George. He's a dear friend, and whoever represents this area, I will make sure that they represent it well. But to me, this is what Councilor Fillmore described as being the least disruptive. And it adjusts everyone's district in some way, but it is also not explosive. If you look at 113, it creates a new Grandview district, and that's unusual. That's really novel, and it really consolidates the east side. Another thing I'll say, back to kind of the similarities and differences, is a neighborhood chair who lives in my area said to me, anywhere you go in the Wasatch Front, the East Bench is a nice place. Alpine, Highland, Northeast Provo. In Southeast Provo, the East Bench has deteriorated and it's not that nice. And so those are the issues I've been working on with those citizens. Those are the things that they're concerned about. And those are some of the reasons that they elected me with such a big margin. I hope I'm doing a good job for them, and I hope whoever represents them does a good job for them. I want them to be well represented. That's what I'm fighting for.
Councilor Handley, what does 34 do for your district? You said it solves some problems, or you like what it does for it. So where are the improvements?
Well, I mentioned it before. It gives me voting a voting precinct down below Kiwanis, which I do not currently have, going down that far south, and also pushes me farther north than I currently am into another voting district. Gives me anyway. So I think it actually increases modestly. I haven't looked at the specific numbers more recently, but it gives me a healthier voting balance in that district. I mean, there's no question in my mind that 113B, it so blows up the question that it's like it's kind of a moot point at that point. It's the issues then are, is that a coherent unit and will that function? I have maybe a slight disagreement, but it's only a slight disagreement with Shannon on that. I don't prefer it, but I don't think it's disastrous. But I do think that I like everything else. Yeah, I like the downtown better in 34, and it's less disruptive. So overall, I don't know. Anyway, that's the main reason. Is it gives me a modest increase of registered voters that someone who runs in my district is answerable to, because it's bothered me ever since I was elected that it's such a small number of people with whom I have to engage regularly as voters, which would be different if I were anywhere else in the city. It's also the cheapest, by far the cheapest district to raise money to run for. And I don't think that's fair.
Mr. Hoban, this is maybe just me talking out loud, and maybe it just gives you time, or thinking out loud. Maybe it gives you time. One thing that I think has been harder on this subject than any other subject is to zoom out and think about the whole city as a whole. And we all are hyper local, and we're all invested in the people that we know and love and want to do right by. But I can't remember who it was in the last 48 hours who I talked to. Maybe it was here today. Talked about just zooming out and looking at the city as a whole, and what beyond our own areas is the best possible thing for those districts. And if we had 7 citywide councilors, hopefully they would always zoom out and look at the whole, and maybe this wouldn't be an issue. Well, it wouldn't be because you'd have 7 citywide councilors, but it's just, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe that gives you another perspective. Are you ready?
I do think it's a fact we're just repeating ourselves.
Yeah.
we're just talking in circles at this point, and I don't feel a need to repeat my points. I think we just ought to vote. The one thought that came to me though, as Mr. Hanley was speaking, is that I know you've had a concern in the past that the way your current district is, that Oak Hills dominates the vote. But that problem is solved by 13B.
Yeah, no, that's. I agree. I mean, that's why I say I'm not as, I would say my opposition to 113B is not as strong.
Yeah,
for that reason.
I think the problem we've got is that, we don't have the luxury of just nibbling at the edges of the current districts if we care about the west side. If we care about the west side, then that's the catalyst for significant changes. And I've agonized over that like all the rest of it. And I've just come down on David Chipley's side. That the I-15 creates not just a demographic issue, it creates a psychological issue in some ways. And I think those people have, for rightly or wrongly, have labored with that sense for some time. And my sense is that the vast majority of them want their own representative. And I think it's time to give it to them. And I think the next 10 years will justify that. That it makes sense to separate Grandview.
Okay, thank you, everyone. All right. We will go ahead and call for a vote on the motion to approve 113B. So if you're raising your hand on this, you're saying this is going to be the map that we're going to insert into the ordinance, ultimately approving for the city for the next 10 years. So no pressure, anyone. Okay. Want to go roll call or raise our hands? Does it matter? Doesn't matter.
Not at this point, because then you're going to do a roll call vote on the final motion,
Okay.
on the final ordinance.
Okay, we will go ahead and call for a vote on approving 113B as the map that will be inserted into the ordinance. All in favor? So that's Counselor Shipley, Counselor McKay, Counselor Hoban, Counselor Fillmore. Approve. And those opposed also need to raise their hands, right? So Counselor Ellsworth, Counselor Whipple, and Counselor Hanley. Okay, so Brian, now we need to recess so you guys can write up the ordinance.
Yeah.
My mic's not on. Based on the reasons that I said before, I think when we go back and do that, I'd be inclined to label the green area on that map as District 2, unless the council indicates to us that they want to do something differently before we go fill out the ordinance.
Can you explain again the implications? So if we were to label it, okay, if everybody else is clear, then I'm clear, fine.
No, I'm not clear.
Okay, so I think clearly for the sake of simplicity that the red area will be District 1, the blue area will be District 4, and the yellow area will be District 5, because there are sitting council members in those districts assigned from those areas. We've got 2 councilors in District 2, so the green area needs to be either 2 or 3, and the purple needs to be the other. You can do it either way. The one thing that I was pointing out earlier is that if you label the purple area as District 2, that district will next have an election in 3.5 years and will theoretically not have a council member for 3.5 years, except for everything we discussed before about the fact that you all represent the whole city and most of those people voted for Councilor Hoban. So it's not, I'm not suggesting that they won't have somebody to go to. But the consideration is when will the next election be held? If the green is 2, there will be an election there in 3.5 years, and Councilor Handley will fill the seat during that entire time. There will be an election in, if the purple is 3, there will be election in 1.5 years. But Councilor Ellsworth will be the District 3 person for that time, and vice versa if you switch them.
Doesn't make sense. Purple district.
Well,
Because
somebody's
of
got to
the
be in
vote.
there. There's nobody that lives there.
Well, then you have a new election.
No,
But if we can't hold a new election without having 8 council members or kicking somebody off the council.
Yeah, not till it's over.
So, but labeling it is what decides when the next election will be. If you label it number 2, Councillor Handley is the sitting councilman from District Number 2, so the purple area won't have an election until his term is up. If you label it number 3,
Him for 3.5 years and Shannon for 1.5.
It's
Yes.
just a matter of where you want
Yes.
the election to happen in a year and a half, and where do you want the election to happen
So-
in 3.5.
can I ask a question here? If you labeled, if you
Sorry.
labeled the green area on this map as District 3, then I would technically be in my district.
correct,
And then if I ran again, when would that be?
in a year and a half.
I would have to run in a year and a half. Okay. And then assuming that Mr. Hanley were in District 2, which is the purple district,
Uh-huh,
then his term is over in 3.5 years,
correct.
Which is the way it is now.
which is the way it is now. Now, if you put me, let's see, the reverse is that Mr. Handley is still representing Green District, which is District 2. And then the next election occurs there in 3.5 years.
Correct.
Whereas, at that time, if I'm representing District 3, which is purple, then they have an election in a year and a half.
So it
And you
does-
won't be able to run for that seat.
Right.
And I won't be able to run for that seat.
So it doesn't affect either of your terms.
Right.
It affects when the people in the purple area get to vote next.
It affects when people get to vote and whether I get to run in a
But-
district I live in.
Yes, whether you or Councillor Hand, and now I am recognizing that he said a few minutes ago he doesn't intend to run again, but the decision would also affect which of you can run
Yeah.
for that.
Well,
again.
so Counselor Ellsworth could run again, but it wouldn't be for 3.5 years, and there would be a 2-year period where she wouldn't be able to be.
Or she could run in a year and a half for the citywide seat that's open in a year and a half.
The citywide seat, yeah.
Doesn't it make more sense if we had a 4-3 vote in favor of giving the west side their own district? Doesn't it make more sense to let them vote sooner on their new representative?
That's why I suggested that that it seems to me more likely that you would label it number 3,
And
but it's up to you.
I'll let you make those decisions, but it does add insult to injury.
You just can't take it personally.
I never do, Bill.
Put that on the record.
Okay, so we need to have a vote on this then, right?
So we're just questioning 2 and 3.
Right.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we label the purple district District 3 so that it has an election in 1.5 years. Is there a second?
I'll
Well,
second that.
no, like, it's not. That was a second, Mr. Fillmore? Second by Mr. Fillmore. Discussion on the motion. Shannon, we love you. This isn't about you.
I just need to stretch my sore leg.
All right, I withdraw my motion. Just kidding. Okay, discussion on the motion. The motion is that we label the purple district, District 3, which would lead to an election in a year and a half when Councillor Ellsworth's term is up. She would not be eligible to run in that district. She could run citywide if she really wanted to at that time, but her district will not be open for 3.5 years when Councillor Handley's term is up. Any additional discussion on the motion?
No, that summarizes it.
All right, we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor? Sure.
I have a question.
Yes.
Could George decide to resign like 2 years early so that Shannon could keep that district?
Well, he could, but who's asking him to do that?
No, I'm just wondering if we could switch it in some other way. I
He
do
doesn't have
love
to
you, George.
resign.
Well, but it doesn't, I mean, you still have one of them out. There's, yeah.
I just
make
want to
a-
know
are
if
you
the
making a
boundaries
motion
that I'm
that-
working
that-
with are the ones that are necessary, or if there are other solutions.
I mean,
Shannon?
you're suggesting that purple be number 2, but that George resign in time before the next election. I mean, that's a possibility, right? I mean, that.
No, let's not put that burden on George. Shannon just runs citywide in a year and a half.
I think it's giving George a measure of freedom. He's got a lot of things on his shoulders.
I'm sorry. I know that this is kind of, defeat some of the protocols we have. I'm just interested in Mr. Hanley's opinion on this, because it's kind of a toss up for me. And maybe it doesn't matter, maybe it's a moot point, but I just wanted to have this conversation. It's not one I was prepared for, to be honest.
I did not raise my hand on that vote, so I was inclined to pass on that option.
Okay.
3.5 years. I mean, it's a trade-off. I was just wanting to give you that option. It doesn't affect me. I don't have any intention of resigning, but I also don't have any intention of running again. So actually, to be honest, since I've lived in your neighborhood, I would love to run in that district. Actually, it would be fun, but I really don't see that that's something I want to do in my 60s.
Well, I'll just say this because it affects me more than anyone else. I just hope people just follow your conscience, right? Don't do what's right for Shannon. Do what's right for the city of Provo.
Well, the reason I raised my hand is because I feel, to Bill's point, we just created this West Side district so they could have a representative, right? Their own rep, their own council member. And now we're saying it's not going to happen for 3.5 years. It does seem a little strange. So that's why, to me, it made sense. Like, okay, let's follow through on what our intent was in creating a West Side district. But if there's not support for that, I mean, that's somebody, yeah. So I'm going to make, oh, go ahead.
What was the vote? Did
Well,
we vote?
I'll just,
Yeah.
I guess we already, I'll just say, I think everyone has done a great service for the West Side tonight. They have, what's the word? Punched above their weight.
All right. Did we have a vote?
You called for a vote and I counted 4 raised hands.
Okay, we need to capture those raised hands. I raised my hand. Okay, those were the 4 raised hands. Counselor Ellsworth, Counselor Shipley, Counselor McKay, Counselor Hoban. Counselor Ellsworth. It's unanimous. It's unanimous. So the purple district will be labeled District 3. It will have an election in 1.5 years.
And I'm their representative.
Yeah. And you're on West Side.
It's because you've done all of those runs on the west side along the Lake Shore Parkway, Shannon.
I'm sorry, what?
It's because you've done all of those runs on the west side along
I've done
the Lake
so many runs. Oh my goodness.
know that area.
I really have. Thank you for building flat trails.
So staff's indicating they need about 5 more minutes to finish writing the ordinance for you to vote.
We'll take a 5-minute recess and then we'll be back at right after 8 o'clock.
Wow.
Recording stopped.
You have time to find a house on the west side.
You could. Wow, that is an interesting.
Seriously.
You could,
That's not true.
Shannon, you could get a house on the west side and then just run for re-election.
Recording in progress.
I gave you one of my favorite neighborhoods. Facto trade.
Well, let me just. So I just. I wish the city allocated some.
Kevin didn't get
I represent your district.
I
forgot. Jeff. Jeff. So, which districts? Okay. So, where does yeah. So you learned how to stop. Yes. Have fun. This is one of the more exciting and interesting. Appreciate that.
Okay. So now we need to vote on the ordinance, correct? Vote on the implied motion. So Brian, do you just want to review what exactly we're looking at here?
Sure. So you've got an ordinance in front of you that is now the amended version of the ordinance. So the implied motion applies to this version. So all that it does is it takes the existing code section that creates that defines the districts, strikes through the precincts, the old precinct numbers, and lists the new precinct numbers based on the new maps, and does so according to the district designation that was voted on a few minutes ago. And then it makes the effective date, I mean, the ordinance is effective immediately, but it doesn't affect elections or midterm vacancies until 2023. So, and one of the reasons why we say, even though people won't actually change until the end of 2023, you want it to be in place so that when people file, they know what they're filing for, because there will be an election in 2023.
And there's some sort of provision in here in case somebody steps down or drives off a cliff.
Well, so there's a provision in state code that determines how that happens. So if there's a midterm vacancy, you open it up for applications, and the council chooses the replacement. So the way this is written right now, if there was a midterm vacancy between now and the end of the year,
We follow state.
you would use the old districts
Oh,
to replace that person. If it happens between the beginning of January 1st, 2023 and the end of that year, you would use the new districts.
wow. Okay.
Can I make a suggestion? This was complicated enough for us to understand. we need a really good press release, really between John, Brian, and Travis to make sure.
And
this is-
Karen.
Karen.
and Karen, right, to make sure that this is super clear, kind of a FAQ kind of a thing, frequently asked questions.
When they be elected and stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, we really got to lay it out, and sooner the better.
Okay. We will talk about that at our next leadership meeting.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. As I recall, when we did the school districts, there was some confusion about the lines for one or two of the precincts with the county. Was that resolved? And okay, good.
Yeah, they adopted the maps that we had, they originally sent us, not the versions that they had created after the final map.
Okay, so we are confident that all of our precincts that we're working with are the right ones.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So we need to open this up for public comment. No?
No, the entire matters was open for public comment earlier.
Okay.
This has just been discussion and part of the process. You just need to vote on the implied
Okay,
motion.
we'll now vote on the implied motion. And this we have to do by roll call.
Oh, is there any comment portion? Any discussion?
Anyone would like to make a comment?
Are we doing counselor comment and public comment?
We don't normally do that. Normally at this point, we just, there's just a vote on the implied motion unless there is another substitute motion. There certainly can be comment from the council. I can't think of a time that we've ever opened public comment again after just making an amendment to the materials.
I see. Okay. Well, I have a comment. And that is, whatever happens to me, it's not important in regards to the big picture. So I just sincerely hope that we all did the right thing, and that's not in any way emotional or punitive or guilt-ridden. It's just really, I sincerely hope that Provo's best interest will be served for the next 10 years.
Thank you. Any other comments? Counselor Whipple.
Yeah, this was a really difficult process, I think, for all of the council members to do. None of my favorite maps made it through this process. But even with that, I have a compact downtown district. So it seems like I shouldn't be complaining about it. But I am hopeful, like Shannon, that this will be a good map. And I know that we'll all work to represent the whole city and to look out for the best interest. And it will be interesting to see what our citizens make of this and how the future elections will turn out in the next few years if we were able to accomplish what we hope to accomplish tonight. And, maybe unexpected good will come of it, or maybe we'll be like, ooh, that was that little bit. Should have changed that one bit, but we'll see. But I'm really pleased with how well everyone worked together on this, how we strived to be collegial and to not have any animosity. And we would listen to each other's concerns and try to carry those with weight and balance everything. And there was just no good way to balance what everyone needed.
Counselor Hanley.
I'll be brief. I said this early on in the process and I still feel it. I think these boundaries are less significant than the kind of political culture that we work to build in our city. And just to echo what's been said, I think that, our ability to be answerable to both those parts of our districts that are different from where we live and also just other parts of the city is what's going to build that culture. And I feel like we are doing that. I feel like this has not been a fractious council. Actually, I can't, in my 4 years. I've not seen that be the predominant feeling on the council at all. I think, and that just needs to continue to be strong so that the boundary issues are not the determining factor in terms of, whether or not democracy works or whether or not people feel they're represented. Because I really do think it's the elected officials that can make the biggest difference in the end.
Comments? Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, we will go ahead and vote on the implied motion. And we will start with Counselor Whipple,
Yes.
Counselor Shipley,
Yes.
Counselor McKay.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Counselor Handley,
Yes.
Counselor Ellsworth,
Yes.
Counselor Fillmore.
Yes.
That's unanimous. Great job, everyone, and I echo everyone else's sentiment. This was a very good process. A very long process, very thorough process.
Mr. Chair, could you declare the meeting adjourned?
Unless there is any objection, we will declare this meeting adjourned by unanimous consent.